that animal, that particular elephant is standing there. And so it's interesting that it was programmed since it was a baby, that when that thing goes around your leg and you are tied down with a 2-foot chain and a 1-foot stake, you're supposed to stand there. You can't go anywhere. That is what you're trained to do. And I was thinking to myself, wow, what is the chains and the stakes that's holding other people back today in life? Have they identified those things? And so I remember I was talking to my dad about that. I was like, why is it just standing there, Dad? And he said in life, he said that, and my father reminds me of Mr. Miyagi, from the Karate Kid in so many ways. Yeah. Wax on and wax off. Yeah. And I remember him one day telling me, we were sitting in our backyard, and he basically said, if you open up your hand like this in your palm, and in your hand, if I were to put rotten rice into your hand, and of course, now he's saying this to me in Korean, so it sounds a little bit different, but if I were to translate that into English, he basically said that if you're holding on to rotten rice into your hand, he goes, what if I was to give you new rice, new fresh rice, and just poured it into your hand? He says, what would happen to the rice? And I said, well, it would probably just flow over. And he goes, exactly. And he goes, what are you still holding on to? And I said, it's the bad rice. And he goes, exactly. He goes, see, you cannot get any new fresh rice unless you let go of what? The bad rice, the stuff that's been spoiled. And so he says in life, sometimes, not sometimes, like all the time, you have to let go of those things that's holding you back. Some people, the street slang would be, what's your baggage? What is holding you back? What is holding that elephant? A 2-foot chain and a 1-inch stake or a 1-foot stake is holding that. So what are those things that are holding you back? And when you find out what it is, you find out that most people suffer greatly from fear, right? Fear of rejection, or fear of death, or fear of being poor and broke, fear of not being loved, right? And so one of my mentors once said to me that the single most basic human need is a sense to belong, right? That you want to belong to a community or whatever. And so those are fears that we all have, and those become our Achilles heel. So, I love Dr. Dantley one time, he said, you know what fear is for me, John? It's an acronym. And I said, great, what is that acronym? And he goes, it stands for feeling excited and ready. And so he goes, we all have fear, but that fear has to cause what? Excitement for you, right? And then guess what? And prepare yourself for you to overcome that fear. But, for me to hear my parents say, always let go of those things. Don't have limitations. Don't have all these restrictions. And, we hear things, we call it verbal programming, right? Where we say things like, hey, money is the root of?
They say all evil.
Of all evil, exactly. Or money doesn't grow on?
Trees.
Save your money for a?
Rainy day.
Exactly. See, we've all heard that, right? And there you are in Canada, we're here in the States, and we've all heard this around the world. And so that is verbal programming, right? And so the same thing when it comes to having limitations, they say, you gotta think think outside the box. Have you heard that before, right? So it's not think outside the box, but how about think like there's no box? No box. Right. So here it is. We've already have a box that's limiting us. And so I always tell people, think like there's no box, the sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want to do. So that's why I tell people. And of course, everybody says to me like, well, how is it where do I begin? Right. And if you read the book, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talks about it on page 36. He says, turning desires into gold. And how do you turn desires into gold? Right. And number one is having a definitive plan. See, most people, once you have a definitive plan, okay, then what you have to do is carry out that plan. But most people don't have a plan. People say, John, how do you write a book? I want to write a book. Can we write a book together? And I was like, sure, let's write a book. And they'll say, okay, great. What do we do? And I'm like, wow. So you want to piggyback on my plan, but you don't have a plan, right? You know what I mean?
That's
so
not a good plan.
Not a good plan, you know? Hey, John, let's go start a business together. I'm like, sounds good. Let's do it. What do you want to do? And like, I don't know. I mean, you're the smart guy. So you got a plan for us to start a business? So no, that's, you know, what is your plan? You're coming to me with the idea, okay? And you're coming to me with whatever your proposition is. What I want to know is, what is the plan? And most people don't have plans.
I was actually going to ask, what do you see as one of the bigger challenges? And I think you just answered that, because, you know, having this idea that I'll go find somebody to reach out to, partner up with, and that's the extent of my creativity, the extent of the time and energy that I've invested in what I think should happen. That's quite limiting. I think a lot of opportunities then, you know, obviously for those reasons specifically, get left behind and missed simply because of a lack of planning. For you, over all these, you know, all of the years that you've had with your successes, obviously growing fantastic connections and relationships with your smattering of endeavors, what would you say has been some of the most tremendous kickback or feedback return on your investment of time and resources and energy and love and passion and down the list?
You know, so for me, in the early part of my career, you know, all those things that you want in life will change over time, right? So when Arlene and I started our entrepreneurial journey, we were broke, right? And we were so broke, we couldn't even pay attention, right? So that's how broke we were, right? Like, we're like, what are we doing? And yeah, that's how broke we were, right? And I said, we got to figure this out. Like we, you know, and this is why we went and bought some books, because we didn't have the things that people have today, like, you know, YouTube and podcasts and things like what you're doing now. You're streaming live on Facebook and you're doing all that stuff. We didn't have that kind of stuff. We didn't even have the internet in the early 1990s. Okay. And even if you want to get a notebook computer, they're about $8,000 to buy a notebook computer. And so we started our business. And for us at that time, we had a goal to get out of debt. I mean, we had $500,000 in student loan debt. We had $80,000 in credit card debt. So you can only imagine, and most of that credit card came from our wedding, you know, and the expenses that we incurred on going on our honeymoon and all that kind of stuff. And so anyway, long story short, we wanted to make a lot of money. Okay. And that's what we did. And then after we made a lot of money, you know, we wanted to save that money, right? We were saving and saving and saving. And I would say for probably from 1994 to about 2000, so for a good solid 6 years, we did not change our lifestyle a whole lot. We didn't go buy fancy cars. We still lived in a condominium. Like, you know, we at least upgraded out of my studio apartment, you know, and that's basically just a square rectangular room that had everything in there with no other walls on the inside. But we did upgrade to a bigger apartment. We went to a 2-bedroom apartment, then to a 3-bedroom condominium, but we were still renting, you know, for the most part, because we didn't know how long this would last. And we saved money and saved money. And then we took that money and reinvested that money, right? And then started having money make money for us, right? Which is what we call passive income. But what ended up happening is, once you got the money, you have the things that you wanted, got a home, you got your family, you've got enough savings put aside, you felt like you've built your family financial fortress around the children. And then what? Like, what do you do after all that? And so one of my mentors once said to me, he said that, John, he said, you know what? You know, I bought 16 cars because I, you know, drove a little tiny Volkswagen, a 1967 Volkswagen Bug, right? So when you're driving down the highway and your pedals to the metal, and you're still in the slowest lane, okay? And everybody's honking at you while they're driving by. Yeah, you kind of go, one day I'm going to have a nice car, okay? And of course, I got carried away and I went and bought 16 different cars, right? But okay, but once you get past all the material things, what motivates you? What still gets you out of bed? What makes you want to go out there and do the work on a daily basis? And I know for some people, they're not going to believe this, but honestly, is if you can help another person become financially free, man, it's one of the greatest feelings you'll ever experience. The emotions you're going to feel. I had a girl, her name is Jamie. I met her when she was 20 years of age. I met her. She grew up in Medicine Town, Montana. Okay, her entire school from K through 12 had under 60 people.
Wow.
K through 12. I had an opportunity to go up to Montana to meet her family and her siblings. I met the teacher. I met the principal. I met the janitor. I met the local sheriff. I met the county clerk. I met the butcher down the street. I met literally about 40 people in a day. And people said, wow, like, how did you manage to meet all those people in one day? And I said, because it's the same person. Okay. When you're in a little town like that. Yeah. It's one person that's doing all that stuff, right? Especially, they had to merge like 3 high schools just to form a football team.
Wow.
And so she didn't go to college, but she knew there was more outside of Medicine Town, Montana. And she came to California. She got a job at 24-Hour Fitness, which at that time was called Bally's Total Fitness, and became, worked at the gym. And my wife met her. And then after my wife met her, we took her under our wing. We started mentoring this girl. And that girl now is making millions of dollars, beautiful family, lives in a mansion on 7 acres of land. I mean, that is one of the greatest feelings ever. I had a young lady last 2 years ago. It was 2019. I was on the Think and Grow Rich World Tour. She was sitting in the audience, and she spent, I think like $240, 47, like $250, and bought a ticket, a VIP ticket, and she showed up to the event. And she's a dental hygienist. Okay, she doesn't, she works in the dental industry. And she said, at the end of that, I said, I'm looking for about 20 people that I could mentor. And I put my phone number out there, and guess what? She called me and she said, hey, do you think that someone like me could become an entrepreneur and actually make a lot of money? I said, well, it all depends how big you're on 1 to 10, your desire, right? Your intense burning desire. Where is it? Are you at a 1 or are you at a 10? She says, I'm at a 10 plus. I said, great, I want to meet with you. So we met. And so we started having this conversation. I said, what do you love to do?
Oh my God, I love this story. I won't say anything. Okay, sorry, go, John.
Yeah, I said, well, first of all, I said, what kind of business do you want to start? And she says, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you love to do? Like, what do you love? John Maxwell, another amazing author and speaker, said that you have to love what you do and do what you love. And if you don't love it, you're going to be a miserable person to associate with, right? Because that anger, the bitterness that you get from being at that job. And I tell people, you could either be bitter or get better. Okay. But you have to love what you do. And she says, I don't know. And I was like, well, what do you love? Like, what would you do 24 hours a day? And you know what she said to me, Kelly? She says, well, I like taking baths. And I was like, what? And I was like, you like taking baths. Okay, this is going to be interesting now, right? And I was like, okay, let me see what we're going to do with this. And she says, okay, so tell me about the bath process. And I know this is a bizarre conversation. And she says, not really. And I'm like, well, what is it about taking a bath that you love? And she says, it's relaxing. It's I can decompress and this. And I go, okay. And then what do you just jump in a bathtub of hot water. She's like, no, I put my bath bombs in there. And I go, a bath bomb. I go, okay, tell me if you don't mind me asking, what is a bath bomb? Is it a grenade? I mean, what? And she goes, well, kinda, and I'm like, well, what is it? So what it is it's like a gigantic Alka-Seltzer, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of sizzles in the water. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. And I go, so what's so cool about that bath bomb? What does it do? And she goes, well, there's a scent. You can make it with Epsom salt. The Epsom salt has healing elements that relaxes your muscle and this and that. I'm like, oh, I never knew that, And I was like, okay. The way she was talking about it, she was so passionate, right? And now I said, now we found your passion. Now we got to go and identify your purpose, which is this. You need to be in the aroma therapy bath bomb business. She was like, wow, really? And I was like, yeah. Okay. So I'm like, what do we do? So I said, well, we'll find a company and we'll get them to do a mold. And we created a mold, and it was actually, believe it or not, it was like a skull, right? And I don't know what it is with the younger generation, but they all love skulls. And so it was a skull, and we molded it, and we put different scents like cherry, strawberry, lavender, whatever you want, passion fruit. And then what happens is you can make it with different kinds of salt. So one of them was Epsom salt. So we built a website, which cost under $800. We went and got the mold made, and then we built up a little bit of an inventory. We created got an online credit card service company. We built out our website. And last year she did, during COVID, right? She did $2.5 million in online sales.
Doing what she loves and what she's passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. And she found a company that will actually hold all the inventory. When the orders come in, they get the email, they fulfill it, and they drop ship it right to the client. And she has no warehouse. She's got no inventory. It's not a garage full of all her stuff. There's a system. And I'll tell everybody that if you want to win big in business, there has to be a system. If you don't embrace systems in your business, and then you're not going to make it. Your business won't survive long term. So when I hear people say, well, I've heard that businesses fell in the first year or two, 90% of them do. Well, then that's a big problem, right? Because we don't want businesses to fail. But if you talk to those business owners that did fail, 99% of them had no systems in place. But once you get the systems in place, then your business runs flawlessly. Okay. Just think about, I look at all the systems like franchises. Okay. Franchises have systems. Okay. If you look at network marketing companies, some people say, I don't like network marketing. I don't believe it. And that's another whole conversation. But, when you look at network marketing companies, most of those companies all have systems, and that's why it's just a plug and play. Right. But, when you look at FedEx, you look at the Postal Service, they all have systems. I mean, imagine putting a little stamp on an envelope and that gets to a destination for $20, or, like FedEx, or an envelope in a mail for 50 cents or so. That to me is a system. Okay. So that's why I tell everybody, man, you got to have systems in your business.
So it's part of, goes back to due diligence and really, outsourcing, or I would say like looking for the resources that you need in order to move forward. Things get missed, and there's a lot of, I can do this on my own. I can do this on my own. I have a quote. Anyone can go alone. No one can grow alone. And I really believe that. And I love your recent example, the examples that you chose to share here. I know that you have a schedule here, so I want to be mindful of that, and we'll wrap things up here. But to your, I'm sorry, shutting my timer off. It's going to be background ringing here on the side. But I had mentioned at the beginning, with your, you are a baron, you have been knighted, and it is, it's not, it's not a far what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. I guess I should have put my bucket of verbal options here next to me. But, as an individual with what does drive you and has driven you for years, and the partnership you have with your wife, and how you've taken that from the personal side of things into your professional side of things, to be recognized as someone who, I am reading to all of you, I have my notes here, but to be recognized, John, as a Baron, is being recognized for his exemplary conduct in achievement, his decisions that he's made to enhance society through leadership, nurturing and developing and inspiring the innovators of tomorrow. I think that's pretty great. When we take our beliefs in the power of faith and the power of hope, the power of charity, and really, when we lift others up, we lift up ourselves. How does that impact the world? How are we able to serve as the truest versions of ourselves, as fantastic citizens that are, showing up and actively participating in, ways that really can move and shift how other people think and live. So really, congratulations to you on that. I think that's a really big achievement and accomplishment, and one that I know that, and you even mentioned it today, it'll continue to grow. It'll continue to shift, and it's very fluid. But either way, with all your decisions to date that you can so lovingly and passionately talk about, which is really, really fun, that it'll continue to serve the world in tremendous spaces and ways. I can't tell you enough. I know that, as a dad, Eric and I work very hard to live with intention, and we work very hard in parenting with intention. So it is very cool to have introduced a piece of what your passion is all about to our family. And my kids, when I interviewed them yesterday, because I was like, well, these independent videos are like, it's gonna take too long. They want it in all of the schools. We talked about, what would happen if your teachers taught this. And, now with school coming up, we'll figure something out. But that's just it. Access to what this information is, something that was relevant all those years ago, still being so very relevant today. So to all of you that catch this, Baron John Shin is doing incredible things. He's going to continue to do incredible things. And stories are always part of the process. It's always part of the journey. And we're all here, I think, just embracing the experiences that come, growing through them, and creating more stories for our families, for our loved ones, families, friends, and generations. And I thank you, John, one, for writing the foreword, agreeing to writing the foreword in our book, and just really taking a heart to it's a little personal today because I just connected with my kids again on this yesterday, but taking such a personal approach to necessary information, and just understanding how necessary and important that is for the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it. I love everything you're doing, Kelly. And I appreciate you inviting me here and spending time with you and your audience and your tribe. And I feel your heart in there and your intentions. And, it's, I don't know, everything we do, we want our children to be the best. We want them to be influenced by the best. And who doesn't want their children to be successful? I mean, everybody wants their kids to be the best version of themselves. So, yeah, absolutely.
That's it. Well, I look forward to it. To those of you, you will see John's, his Facebook link is in the post. So definitely go find him, navigate what he's doing, plug into everything he's got rocking and rolling, because you do not want to miss out. Everything's very exciting. With a growth mindset, you just can't go wrong with what he's got going on. And with his Think and Grow Rich Legacy, the movie, our viewing, of course, for Friday night at the movie theater with Landed for Success is this Friday evening, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So grab your complimentary ticket. The link is also in the post. By all means, if you need a personal walkthrough of how to do that, reach out to me. I will make sure that that happens. John, have an amazing rest of your Wednesday afternoon. And I know that we will see you Friday evening for another Friday night at the movies with you, followed with some a little bit of Q&A with you afterwards. And just appreciate you stepping into the spotlight today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Kelly. Have a good one.
You're welcome. And everyone, thank you for catching us. For those of you catching us on the replay, that gratitude and appreciation is extended to each and every one of you as always. Have a wonderful day.